Welcome to the Sad Boys Book Club in this special Saturday edition because I am lazy and decided not to edit and get the first episode out last Wednesday, so here we are, 2 a week, woo. My name's Dusty.
Yeah, and I'm Daniel.
Shining.
Still enjoying it.
Yeah.
Still pretty good.
Also because I'm lazy, I need to do this better because let me tell you, reading 174 pages in a day was not fun.
See, this is a good book. I'm really enjoying it, but I like what I'm doing where I'm cracking it open for, I don't know, 20, 30 pages a night. I think that's the way to do it with King, I think, instead of just like trying to cram it in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it has nothing to do at all with the quality of the book. The book is fantastic, and I've been loving every page of it. It's just that it's the doing it because I feel like I have to because I keep procrastinating it, not because I want to, and it just kind of puts that tension in the background of it, that almost kind of like that worry, that stress, that like, ooh, there's something watching me that I don't know, and wait a minute, why is that bunny suddenly crouched down, and why are the lions closer to me? What? You know, something kind of like that. That wasn't foreshadowing, by the way. So yeah, I need to get better, but I need to read more at night instead of just like cramming it all in one day. But
yeah, this is just a general question. I don't know how many folks are out there that would be interested in answering this question, but like, drop in our comments. How are you like a binge reader or like do you have like checkpoints style reader? Like you're like, I'm gonna read X pages a night, that kind of thing. Because when I was younger, I was definitely a binge reader, partially because of the function that I just had more time. So like I was that kid that would go to the library and check out a bunch of books, and then maybe not read all of them, but read most of them by the time I had to come back. But like I feel like for various reasons I don't really have the stamina to do that anymore, to like just like crank out a book in 2 or 3 days. So I don't know. I'm just curious. Do other people I would be curious among people that do read a lot of books what their usual method of reading is.
Yeah, I think for me it's the stress of the deadline because I mean I read Light Lark in 8 days, and that was maybe 3 or 4 days of reading. No, actually, I think it was like 3 days of reading, and that book's like 400-ish pages. I remember there was a night where I started reading at I think like 10 o'clock. I was reading The Eye of the World, and I ended up going to bed at 2:30 because I just got so absorbed into it because, you know, that was me reading because I wanted to reading a book that I wanted to read because I was enjoying it, purely only because I was enjoying it. With The Shining today, and yes, this was today, by the way, that I read 174 pages. It was A, because I was enjoying it, and B, because I had a deadline to reach, and I had just not found the time throughout the week to sit down and even read 20, 30 pages. So, yeah, I crammed for like 3 hours today, just like reading it. It was across 2 different sittings, because it was like in the morning while my son was like taking his nap. I read like 75 pages. Then we went out and did things together, got lunch, played at the park, came back, and then I was like, all right, let me crack out the last like 99 pages I needed to read here for part 3. And yeah, I need to do better about that because it's a great book and I'm enjoying it and it's so good and I love Stephen King and I love The Shining so far. But yeah, better habits will lead to better enjoyment and less stress. So I should start reading part 4 like tomorrow or something, like start it rather. So yeah, I'm super fresh on it though, so that helps.
Yeah, definitely. Last little thought here before we dive directly into the book. One thing I've also liked doing is like during my lunch breaks at work is just popping it open and reading however many pages I could squeeze in. Sometimes it's not like a ton, but I don't know. I find that's like it's a really nice thing at work to really redirect your mind so that when you go back into it, your brain has had a true like break because you're focusing your attention deliberately on something else. I don't know. It's kind of a nice thing. I've been really enjoying doing since we started this this podcast.
Yeah. So yeah, let's just, I guess, jump straight into it. So we're covering part 3 today. In case anyone forgot or is just now coming in on this one, the last week we covered part 1 and 2. So part 3, we're starting. It was called The Wasp's Nest, and boy, does that subtitle really come into play immediately. So this part covers, I would say, it's the start of their solitude at the Overlook, though not total solitude because they still have access to Sidewinder, and goes all the way through a little after the snow finally sets in and they are now truly trapped in the Overlook for the rest of the season. And we kind of get a little more of that kind of bubbling horror that King is so great at doing, where we get a little bit of tension, a little bit of scares, a little bit of a peek behind the curtain of what's to come, but it's still building, it's still boiling a little bit. We haven't quite gotten to that tipping point. So, yeah, just a very, very tense part, a lot of character work, a lot of foreshadowing, a lot of aha. We got a couple aha moments immediately with like some foreshadowing being paid off, and we're starting to see the cracks form in Jack Torrance, and yeah, it was a very good part. Yeah, really enjoyed it. It did not feel like the 3.5-ish hours I spent reading today. It went smoothly. It felt very fluid, and I had a great time reading it without thinking about the deadline I imposed on myself. And yeah, just really, really good book. Really enjoying it.
Yeah, it's really good. I don't know. I'm very excited. I really like. It ends on a very this week ends on a very excited to see what comes next.
Yeah, it's very much a throw away everything you've been told so far kind of ending to a part. So we start, and I'm gonna try and just kind of broad stroke a lot of this because I feel like. I feel like I've said this a lot here. I feel like this is probably the 4th or 5th time that I've said this, that not a lot of plot happened in this section. It was more a lot of character development. And I realize, like I said, I've said this a lot, but I think that tends to happen a lot when you're in the second act of a novel, is, you know, we have the establishment, now we have the build, and then we're going to have the release, and then the fall. So we're once again in that building stage. So yeah, we start with Jack just doing some of his menial tasks that he's been set off to do at the Overlook, and in this case, he's reshingling the roof before the snowfall. And as the title of the part suggests, and like I alluded to earlier, the Wasp's Nest, he finds, with the worst possible way you could discover, a wasp's nest under one of the shingle trimmings, or what did he call it? Like a fastening, or what was the term for it? Do you remember?
I forget, but it was something like that. He was pulling up shingle, and he disturbed a nest, and then they were all over him and all that.
Which, I mean, I know it was 1977, but like, I'm sorry, man. Are you telling me you were doing shingle work without gloves on?
I mean, I think it's fair to say that Jack may be a little in over his head. I mean, that's stating it lightly, given what I mean. Not to spoil anything, but I think we all know where the general contours of what a horror. You know, a man goes into a creepy hotel. You know, he's gonna be in over his head, but like. In the most literal sense, like he's not. I mean, people say that previous generations were maybe more handy, and I don't know that is strictly speaking true. But like this guy, he's clearly, you know, kind of just fumbling his way through a lot of these tasks. The the lack of caution that he displays in this particular like roofing, even when you're like working like residential roofs where you're like it's like in most instances like a 10-12 foot drop. They take a lot more precautions than Jack, who was really just kind of freestyling it up there with and when you also add into account the wasp infestation, I think it's very interesting. He basically, I think it said that he was like 70 feet up in the air.
Yeah,
it was pretty ridiculous that he was up there, and yeah, I thought it was very interesting meditation on the idea of fear and instinct, where he is 70 feet in the air, and the rational mind would say you have to be very careful up there, but once like you're being stung by wasps, you're like the sort of like the lizard brain, your fear response, as it were, can take over and cause you to fall to your death. I wonder if that is not a little bit of a little thematic work there on the part of King.
Yeah, and we do get some internal monologuing from Jack that is kind of going into that lizard brain mentality, as you mentioned. I'm going to posit a theory here, and I'm getting a little ahead of myself, as I tend to do as well. So something I find interesting in retrospect was when he gets stung, and he's like, "Ah, oh, damn wasps." He thinks to himself how he had every single day he'd been doing this. He had been going up there and like bringing bombs with him and preparing for possibly stumbling upon a wasp's nest. And then that morning he was just so lost in the beauty of the morning, of the weather, of the sunrise, and just nature as a whole, that he just kind of got a little bit of a pep in his step and was like, I'm going to be a little more carefree today. And of course, this is the day that he encounters the wasp nest. So, going off of a few things that we'll talk about here pretty soon, would you say that it is within the realm of possibility that the Overlook Hotel intentionally placed that wasp nest in the roof part there because of Jack's mentality for that morning? And I will try to remember to come back to this point when the time comes. I just wanted to kind of throw it out into the ether, just so it's kind of floating around and ready to be grabbed again when the time comes. But this is when Jack kind of staring almost hypnotically at the wasp nest as he's made his way back around to it, and thankfully the cold has made them sluggish, so he only got that one sting on his finger. This is when we finally get the full story of George Hatfield and what happened that caused Jack to lose his job. And there's something that King does here, and he does it again later on with Danny, with Room 217, that I just absolutely love. And it's an almost, like, I don't want to say narcissistic tendency that Jack and Danny both show. Narcissistic may not be the right word, but it just kind of reminds me of something that's kind of like that. And so to just kind of like really brush through it quickly, because this is just kind of more character setup more than anything else. So George Hatfield was the super cool jock guy that just kind of coasted through the prep school Stovington. He was getting B's and C's, and he was just an absolute unit on the soccer and baseball team. And he wanted to join the debate club because his dad was a lawyer and a rich dude. And his dad was like, "You're going to be a lawyer just like me." And George was the kind of person who was like, "Yeah, sure, I don't care. That's fine, Dad. I'll do what you do. That sounds fine with me because I don't have an original thought in my head."
It was also a time when you could really it was a lot easier to become a lawyer. you could literally just anybody, like B's and C's guy with his dad as working in a law firm, could that you could write your ticket pretty much.
Yeah. So he joins the debate team, and what Jack notices is that he has a real gift for the preparatory stage of debate. He uses the term like jingoism or jingoistic in terms of like how he approaches these, which, if you don't know, is like blind patriotism or blind nationalism, for lack of a better description. I'm really generalizing with the definition. Just like really extreme nationalism is like jingoism. That's generally how it's used, at least in terms of like a political format. But so yeah, he gets like really deep into the research. It doesn't matter what the subject is, what side he's on, he will do everything in his power to win that debate. However, when the time comes for him to start speaking on his side of the debate, he stutters. And it doesn't happen any other time. He just gets so into it, so excited, so deeply focused that his brain just shuts down his speaking center and he stutters. And the main point of contention, the watershed moment, if you will, was an incident where he's giving a debate, and Jack, I don't know if it's he rings the bell or if it's like a timer. It's a timer. Yeah, that's right. So the timer goes off, and George gets angry because he feels like Jack set the timer short. He's like, I was looking at the clock, I was counting, you set it short. They have this huge kind of like scuffle. George kind of blows up about it, and it pushes Jack. And Jack blows back up on him and mocks him a little bit. And then George storms off. And we get the, you did that because you know. And then he leaves, and Jack's like, because I know what? Well, because I know nothing, you silly goose. And about a week later, he kicks him off of the debate team. And this is kind of what I was talking about earlier with the like almost kind of narcissistic tendency that you see in Jack. Was he's like, I didn't do it. I did not do it. There's no way that I promise you I did not change the timer. I never changed the timer. I didn't touch it. I totally didn't touch it. So what if I set it forward an extra minute? I was doing him a favor.
Yeah, that was great because like at first I mean, obviously this is a kid. But like I was a little bit like, wow, this kid is just being a little snot. And then when you as you read your like you get a little more context, and then just that beautiful little revelation of like, yeah, he totally screwed the kid over.
Yeah. And the great thing about it is, you know, I said it here all at once, but this takes place over the course of like 10 pages. Where he's just like, I didn't do it throughout the conversation, the retrospect in his mind. And then once we get to the end of it, he's like, yeah, so what if I did set it forward an extra minute? He was stuttering. It was a mercy. Everybody was just basically cringing at what he was doing. So it's that great. The truth comes out.
That was so good though. Like because even in his memory, his self-justification, as he's thinking about it, he's still telling himself he didn't do it until that moment, and it's just this beautiful display. And this is why one of the reasons why I say King is such a good writer of people. He shows like that way of like of double think that most people, I'm going to be just broadly and say most people, you know, will engage in from time to time, is where they have their blind spot is themselves and their desire to justify themselves.
Yeah. So, after cutting him from the debate team, that's when we have the incident where Jack walks out on him slashing his tires, and he beats him, and he sees red. He doesn't really realize what he's doing until he's stopped by another teacher, and then he realizes what he's done, and he becomes Jack Torrance again. The nicest guy ever. Totally. The nicest guy in New Hampshire, or wherever they are. And then he starts trying to help the kid, but at this point it's too late, and he loses his job, and yada yada yada. So we get the full story for that, which was a great kind of look into Jack Torrance's character, even being sober, and even though we've been told about his temper and seen things with like him breaking Danny's arm while he was still drinking and whatnot, this is just the actual context, the actual story, instead of just being told, hey, this happened. It was what actually happened. So it was a great build on Jack's temper, which we will see reoccurring throughout the rest of the book. So back to the wasp's nest. So yeah, he's like, okay, I'm gonna get a bomb. I'm gonna kill all these little stingy dudes, and you know what? I had one of these in my room when I was a kid, so I'm gonna save it for Danny. and that's what he does. Meanwhile, Danny and Wendy are out Christmas shopping.
That was such a crazy decision.
Yeah.
Like, why this is such like this is like a beautiful look at like the boomer brain. It just thinks like the things that they chose to do. It's just like in when they decided to become parents is just like, that is a really bizarre. Why would you do that? Why would you even begin to think that's a good idea?
Hey kid, would you like some chewed up wasp vomit?
Boy, do I!
One last thing that I want to just brush on real quick with the wasp nest is that after he deploys the bug bomb on the wasp nest, is that he refers to it as a workable symbol for what he's been through in his life. I'm trying to puzzle out what do you think he meant by that?
I mean, my understanding of it was that like he spent his entire life essentially tempting fate with the metaphorical wasp's nest. Like he was someone that he couldn't get out of his own way, so he kept sticking his hand in the wasp's nest. I mean, he outright says that in the metaphorical sense, but my understanding of it was that it was him thinking that he couldn't get out of his own way with the alcohol or his temper, and it was him trying to like, I think it was him trying to rationalize it and try and maybe put the blame on the universe instead of on him, to kind of throw out some sort of excuse or rationalization that makes him sound like a better person. Like, oh, it wasn't me that did this, it was life that's doing this to me.
That is true. That did come during a long long portion, or just after a long portion of like the self-justification.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, we even saw it with the George Hatfield thing when he was like he was Jack Torrance again after he had stopped seeing red, and he was now the nicest guy in New Hampshire or whatever, as the self-proclaimed. So there's a lot of justification in Jack Torrance's actions.
It's interesting. Also, put a pin in that idea of what the wasp nest represents, at least to Jack, as he gifts it to his son. Something to put a pin in your mind there for.
Yeah. So, yeah, Danny and Wendy come back from their Christmas shopping. We learn that so Danny's super excited about the wasp nest. He's like, "Oh boy, that's super swell, father." And we learn that he is he's practicing to learn how to read and maybe write on a smaller scale. And it's something he's taking super seriously. And he's just going harder than both Jack and Wendy expected or really kind of want, because they're worried that he's kind of hyperextending himself, so to say. Mm-hmm. But he's just so into it. And I think part of it is he just wants to finally be able to read all of those signs that Tony is sending him, because he knows some of them, or he at least knows the feeling of them, but he just wants to read them. At least I think that's at least part of it. I
totally agree. I think that's like, he wants to do it because he wants to do it for his dad and for his mom. I think he wants to make them proud. I mean, that's a character trait we see in Danny throughout the novel to this point, is this very strong love he has for his parents and desire to please them. But specifically, I think what he's doing here is because he, like you're saying, he mentions seeing these signs and words and things that Tony is showing him, but he doesn't quite understand them. I think that's what he's trying to do, absolutely, is that he's trying to strengthen his skills because he knows there's this incoming danger. So because of that love for his parents, he's pushing himself so that he can learn and see and possibly forestall these bad future events that he's vaguely aware of.
Yeah. So we get some information about that and how much Danny's into it. Meanwhile, Jack is having epiphany after epiphany. He's gotten past his writer's block, and he's finally feeling like he is about to finish his play. We get told a little bit about his play as well, back up on the roof with the wasp's nest, and how it's kind of a old dean of a or principal of a high school that was an up and coming student but failed is now battling against the main character who he sees as his younger version of himself, yada yada, and that it kind of tropey kind of thing, but it's a play, so whatever. And he's been finally getting breakthroughs on that, and he's feeling like he'll be able to finish his first draft pretty soon and hopefully have a pretty clean script by the end of the year that he could send to his agent.
Yeah, it was his agent. It is the subject of that play is very ironic when you take into account that he was actually the guy that ended up beating up his student and being the most literal antagonist you could possibly be. But I think that is kind of an interesting look into Jack, because during that portion where he was talking about George Hatfield, he did mention his own similar exploits when he was younger, and I don't know if this was. I think this is something that I don't think he called this an explicit parallel to it, at least the character of Jack. But I think the concept is that the King wanted us to take away from that is there is a certain lack of self-awareness on the part of Jack, that he may view himself as the young upstart still, but yet he is in practice more the jaded authoritarian figure that is kicking down at people that he can.
Yeah, so a lot of great poetic irony in this so far. Some of it that I find kind of funny is Jack is like kind of self-aware to the point to where he's like almost to the point of pure self-awareness, but like just kind of barely misses the mark, especially with, like I said, his self-justifications of his behavior and his actions.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's that night. Danny had a bit of an episode. He had some visions in the bathroom. He locked the door. Jack had a temper flare that like almost was something more than like akin to what he was when he was drinking, but I guess he kind of caught himself. And Danny alludes to the timer. He says something about the timer, and that scares Jack. And when he starts crying and kind of blubbering a little bit, Jack shakes him and shouts, "Don't stutter." So we get that like kind of that. It's very. I mean, obviously the reason why Danny is hearing and saying these things is because of his shining with Jack, and he's able to read and hear kind of at least some semblance of what Jack was thinking of that day. It's not a coincidence that Jack was thinking about George Hatfield. That's why Danny said the things he did, was because he was thinking about it that day. But for Jack, he thinks he's like I know he said that clear as day. And he just can't make heads or tails of it. He's just like, wow, what was that about? Why did I even get on him for stuttering? That's so weird. I know he said timer. But Danny is just a very weird kid, and he just basically lets it all go eventually. And he's like, yeah, that's cool. I love you, Dad. You're the best. Mom, you're pretty cool too, I guess. Night. And he goes to bed, has a nightmare, and wakes up to like 5 or 6 wasps on his arm. And lo and behold, the wasps have returned. What? Oh my goodness. Wow. How have the wasps returned after Jack has killed them all and made sure that there were none left? So now Jack and Wendy are killing the wasps. Danny's arm has like 12 stings in it, I think, and is swelling up, and they put him in the other room and they're killing the wasps, and they're like, how did this happen? And Wendy's freaking out because she's like, I knew this was a bad idea. And Jack's like, I made sure I did it right. Oh, those bug bomb companies, they're going to pay through the nose. And Danny,
also, yelling. And this is another temper flare up. In such a short time, he's yelling at his wife, and even yelling at Danny at a portion, just verbally abusing them.
Yeah. So he goes to go try and get some bug spray, but Wendy has killed them all at that point. And so he decides he's going to take Polaroids of Danny's arm, how it looks, and the nest itself, because he wants to try and sue the bug bomb company, because he's like, oh, I followed the directions, it didn't work, I'm gonna sue them for this. And so he gets a oh no, he doesn't get a bug spray or anything. He gets a bowl. That's right, he gets a bowl, a clear bowl, and he places it over on top of the nest just in case there are any more still in there. And so when he goes back in there to get a picture of the nest, he sees that the bowl is just filled with wasps, like 50 or 60 or something like that. And it's just like, how did this happen? It's like they just regrew. And he's like, there's no way if there were
spontaneous generation.
yeah, he's like, if there were eggs in there, there's no way they would mature that quickly. So he just kind of puts something under it and like slides it onto the thing that he's holding and takes it outside, and he's like, I will freeze you to death, you will die in the morning. And that's kind of the end of the wasp incident, so to say, at least in terms of like the major event itself. But to kind of go back to what I mentioned earlier, and I told you, I was like, keep that in the back of your mind. So this is kind of what I'm talking about with the whole, do you think the Overlook intentionally placed the wasp nest, like created out of the ether the wasp nest and put it on the roof, purely because that was the morning that Jack did not take the precaution for wasps? Because clearly we've seen that the hotel, because they were dead. He had an empty nest. It was sitting on the porch. He handled it. Danny handled it. It only became a thing until around midnight that night. And Wendy said she killed them all. There were none left. But when Jack put the bowl over it and came back in, not minutes later, there were 50 plus more inside the bowl buzzing around. So clearly the hotel has the forces that control the hotel have created more wasps, both, before and after Danny getting stung. So yeah, do you think that the hotel created them in the first place for Jack that morning?
I think that's probably a fair thing to say. I think it does kind of. It's interesting that wondering why it chose that particular manifestation, but it is I think that is probably what we're supposed to take away, because why would it? I don't know. It wouldn't make sense, at least to me, for it to appear and then like naturally, and then the second appearance or second time we come back to it when it's they're all attacking Danny, and then there's even more that are generated. I feel like it would make more sense if it was just the wasp nest is like an apparition of the hotel at all points, essentially.
Well, the stings were real, though.
Well, no, they're real stings. Maybe apparition is the wrong word, but they are like it is essentially something that was created by the hotel to specifically to torment them.
Yeah, which something I feel like I noticed in this part here that's kind of part of the escalation of the tension is that it seems like there's three major incidents in this part here. I would say there's the wasp nest itself, the hose, and the topiary. Those are our three major events, and with all three of them, I feel like it is a bit of a sense where the hotel is kind of taking the victim of the situation and just kind of playing with their expectations. So they expect something to happen, and when they either let their guard down or they essentially try and poke the bear, so to say, that's when the event triggers. So it's almost like it's toying with them in all three of these situations. It's going up against their predispositions and trying to make them feel like something is wrong with them instead of something wrong with the hotel.
Yeah, that's what is this inhuman place makes inhuman monsters, something to that effect.
It's this inhuman place makes human monsters.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think that is apt to your point. Is like this idea is like it is intentionally doing something to them to make them to display maybe the worst traits of themselves and to make them lash out in a certain or react in a certain way that is damaging.
Yeah. And speaking of that quote, so Wendy earlier that afternoon when they got back from Christmas shopping, she said that she wanted to have them all particularly Danny, have a doctor's appointment the next day, just so they could, just make sure they're good, make sure everything's okay. She was kind of worried about the incidences that Danny has been having, and she just wants to make sure that he's okay, there's nothing wrong with him, and they're not going to be having a situation that requires medical assistance while they're snowed in and unable to do anything about it. And Jack agrees. And so, how fortuitous that they had a doctor's appointment planned the next day, because now Danny has been stung by wasps multiple times. So now we're at the doctor's office. Oh, what was it, doctor? Was it Bill Edmonds? I think it was Edmonds.
That sounds right. Let me see if I can find... Yeah, Dr. Edmonds, yeah.
Yeah, so the wasp stings, relatively inconsequential. They will go away. Thankfully, he's not allergic. But the big thing that he was there for was for his visions, his mental lapses, his hypnosis state, whatever you want to call it. It's his shining, but obviously they don't know that, the parents. And so he has a talk with Edmonds, and he gets a vibe from him that exudes kind of secrecy and confidentiality, so he's able to open up to him in a way that he wouldn't with his parents. He tells him about how they've been feeling like divorce for a while, but not anymore. He tells him about Tony. He mentions that his mother is currently thinking about her dead sister, and just all of these things that are just kind of Danny doing Danny things. And of course the doctor is trying to rationalize it, as you do, and he kind of goes along with him and the whole thing with Tony, and he's like, can you bring Tony out? Can you go like visit him on command? And he's like, I can try, but there's no guarantee. And he's like, well, can you just try? And so Danny tries, and he succeeds, and he gets to Tony, and he gets another nightmare, another vision of things to come. We get a little more foreshadowing of things that are probably going to happen, the big thing being Jack in the basement finding a white book, and Danny having this sense of dread around that book, thinking, oh, he shouldn't grab that book, don't grab the book, oh no, that book is bad. So, and then that's where the quote comes, this inhuman place makes human monsters, and it's going over and over and over and over until the doctor breaks him out of it, and he only catches pieces of it. And so the doctor sends Danny away, gets Jack and Wendy in there, and it's just like, oh yeah, kid's got an imagination on him, you know how it is. Oh yeah, you guys are getting a divorce. Oh well, he created Tony to try and cope with that because he needed a friend in a trying time, and kids are very apt at reading moods and whatnot. They're very, very emotionally gifted things, and they, so it's just he's just coping. That's all it is. He's just coping, and just kind of
the
playing
doctor
it off.
really said, cope harder, Danny.
Yeah.
He said, Danny on that copium.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Danny. The Patriots aren't making the Super Bowl in 77. Get over it, scrub. Meanwhile, middle-aged Danny's just like, yes, that Brady guy finally did it. Yeah, middle-aged Danny, if he's still a Patriots fan, ate real good for 20 years.
Maybe we will see in Dr. Sleep.
I haven't read or watched Dr. Sleep, but yeah, it would be great if there's some little like King-esque, like it's not King that wrote it, kind of just diatribe where Danny is just sitting there talking about his life. I'm pretty sure it was written while Brady was still in New England. I don't know when Dr. Sleep came out, but I'm assuming it was before 2019. And just some little blurb where he's just like, I still follow the Patriots, and boy, I have never been more of a football fan than I am now. That Thomas Edward Brady Jr. guy, I think that's his name, is just a real fellow. I am just eating good as a football fan. Like, that would be so King to just have some little bit like that.
Mm-hmm.
Which, for context, by the way, Danny was wearing a New England Patriots jacket, I think, at some point in time. Or Jack was.
I think it was specifically at this visit to the clinic. Or maybe it was
right.
Maybe it was when he was going. Yeah, I think that's what it was. I remember it was on some outing specifically that they mentioned, so I think it was the clinic.
Yeah, football aside though. So yeah, the doctor just kind of plays it off. Oh, kids and their imaginations. Probably he could probably feel the divorce you were talking about. The only thing that kind of stumps him is he asks Wendy about her sister, and she's like, "Yes, I was thinking about her out there." And he's like, "You ever tell Danny?" And she's like, "No, I have never mentioned her to him. That's weird." And so Wendy's just kind of she thinks to herself, the doctor's trying to just kind of logic away all of these coincidences, but she's thinking to herself, well, he doesn't know about the time that Danny would do things. I would think something, and then I would go out, and Danny would have essentially helped get ready for it. Like she wants tea, and he has a cup with a tea bag in it by the time she gets downstairs. She wants to go return some books to the library, and she goes down, and they're all stacked up with her library card on top. Those like little things that are just very precognition of Danny to do, and like no point in mentioning that because this doctor has already made up his mind, despite him saying multiple times, "I'm not a psychiatrist," but... So, it kind of was a wash. Didn't really get anything for them. They get a little bit of peace of mind personally. Because, hey, it's not epilepsy. Woo. So, yeah. But it's not really... We as readers, we know what's going on. So, we know that this was just nothing. But Jack is at least somewhat assuaged by this. Wendy... maybe is, but I know that she's going to think that there's something more going. So that was more or less the doctor's trip, and it just kind of was just a way for us to get a little more of Danny and The Shining. So, fun stuff.
Yeah.
And so now we are on to, and boy, King did not wait long for this foreshadowing to this Chekhov's gun to fire, so to say. Now we get to the scrapbook. And so Jack is down in the boiler room doing the things that he has to do multiple times a day because, if you didn't know this, by the way, that ticker creeps up. So you got to make sure that you got to bring it back down. So he's, doing his thing. He's just looking through the stuff that's down there because there were boxes of things and stuff and old nonsense and whatnot. And he's just kind of flipping through them, looking through things, getting a little bit of what he can from the history of the place. And so he finds this white book that ends up being a scrapbook, and he's flipping through it, and he just kind of I feel like this whole bit, this was like 20 pages or so. It works so much for the world building, but it doesn't really do much in terms of the plot. I feel like a lot of this is going to kind of come back into play. And some of it kind of is giving context to things that have already happened, because I don't remember if we mentioned this, but when Ullman was giving them the tour of the hotel when they first got there, he shows them the presidential suite, and something that Halloran had told Danny before he left was that you'll see things, but remember that nothing here can hurt you. It's like pictures in a book. You can see them and they might scare you, but they can't do anything to you. And when they're leaving the presidential suite, Danny sees blood. It looks like, at first, it's just blood stains on the wall with something that looks like possibly brain matter. And then when he looks again, now it's fresh blood and it's dripping down the wall. And then when they're like leaving, it's gone, and yada yada. And so we actually learn what happened in the presidential suite eventually. But yeah, in the scrapbook, it's just kind of a history of the changing of the hands in for the Overlook, and there's always one reoccurring thing, and it's oh no, what was his name? The possibly billionaire magnate.
Horace Derwent.
Horace Derwent. Yes, thank you. He always pops back up, and he bought it in, was it the 40s? Was it post-war? He bought the hotel. I think it was like 47 to 52.
He bought it. The grand opening was in 45.
Yeah, it was August 45, right before the war ended. And I want to say it was until like 52 or 53. I don't remember until he sold it for the first time. But we kind of get the story of it changing hands a lot, and there's a lot of kind of not so legal, not so morally or ethically just things going on with the ownership of the Overlook, and a lot of it seems to have ties back to the mafia, and a lot of it always
lots of tax dodging and shell company stuff going on that I think, and I think that's something that they deliberately mention, is that they're in one of the scraps is that's in the scrapbook is that they're trying. There's a lot of people in government that are trying to do some like research into it, but they get like bought off or something like that.
Yeah, and we have like some expose from some investigative journalist, which boy, those used to be things, and we get a lot of information about all of this, and it always comes back to Derwent. Derwent is always connected in some facet, whether because he's the owner himself or a shell company that eventually gets linked to him is the owner. So Derwent is going to be a reoccurring figure, I feel. Maybe not in person, but there's always going to be the shadow of Derwent over the Overlook in some facet. I feel like that's how it's going to go, because there's no reason why King would really focus on Derwent if that wasn't going to be a thing. So
I totally agree. There's no reason to mention this scrapbook at all. If Derwent or at least the doings of Derwent were not going to come back in a major way.
Yeah, and we see this more here in a bit. But yeah, he goes through it, and we learn that he was working with a lot of ties to the mafia, like I said, a lot of gambling rings in Las Vegas. And the incident that ended up happening was there was a mafia boss named Vito Giannetti.
Isn't it Gianelli?
Gianelli? Okay, I'm going off of memory here, and I apologize if I'm getting the names wrong. Gianelli, thank you. It's like Vito Gianelli, and he was staying in the presidential suite with 2 bodyguards, and there was a hit, essentially. Some masked assassins came up and killed his 2 bodyguards and him, and possibly cut his balls off and took them with them. Interesting detail. So that was the murder that Danny saw the blood from. So we get a payoff of that.
That was really cool when they died. It was like, wow. When that happened, I really, I don't know. After reading House of Leaves, I've gained an appreciation for like interwoven narratives and stuff like that. So to have those little not explicit setups and payoffs, it was a really cool thing to read.
Yeah. Which, by the way, kind of backtracking a little bit, talking about setups and payoffs. So something that we've seen reoccurring with Danny's nightmares is him being chased by someone holding the roque mallet and like slamming it into the walls and chasing after him and shouting down on him. One of the things that we've been consistently hearing from the person chasing him, which if you know what The Shining is, you know who's chasing him. That's not. It's one of those things to where it's Darth Vader. No, I am your father kind of things. Everybody probably knows the twist of The Shining at this point because it's almost 50 years old and the movie is like a major cultural icon. So if you don't know who's chasing Danny, congratulations. I don't know what rock you were under for the last 50 years to make that a thing, but congratulations all the same. I'm not going to say it here.
It'll make the payoff a lot better.
It really would. Anyways, well, actually, I'm not going to say it here. Here I am about to say it. So the thing that the person chasing him is always saying is like, "Come here, you son of a bitch! Come and get your medicine." And an interesting thing that happens in the story with George Hatfield is when Jack walks outside and sees him slashing his tires, he says, "Oh, okay, that's how you're gonna play this. Come and get your medicine."
Oh, I didn't even make that connection.
Talk about some good writing, King. God damn. That I saw that, and once again, it's one of those things to where it's like everybody knows the twist. Everyone knows what's coming because this has just been such a major cultural icon. Mostly, let's be completely real here, because of Kubrick. But even still, King is responsible for it at the end of the day. So we know what's as you and I having a knowledge of the movie, we know what's coming. We know what's going to happen. So more or less, the broad strokes at least, because the book is vastly different. But even still, that moment, they've been building up Jack's temper and how destructive he can be with his temper, but both with Danny's arm and George Hatfield. that when you have Danny having these visions in part 1 and 2, that come on, you son of a bitch, come get your medicine, and then in part 3 we get the first sign that person carrying the mallet, it may not I'm gonna be really cute here for a second. It may not necessarily be Jack, but it has some sort of connection to Jack because he's saying the same thing that Jack did to George Hatfield. So like I said, I'm being cute a little bit here, but
So when you're getting cute, you do a little bit of a Jimmy Stewart there.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
I'm like, what are you doing here with the?
I see you got you got that rook mallet there, hey? I wonder what you're gonna do with that mallet, huh? You little.
Oh yeah, I had that over here. It's a rogue mallet.
Oh
you
yeah.
Don't see too many of those.
Why don't you come here, you son of a bitch? Why don't you come and take your medicine?
This is the cutting edge comedy here.
Yes, it is.
Jimmy Stewart impressions in 2023.
Yeah.
Or
the
current
totally
year
accurate.
of listening.
Yeah. But anyways, so yeah, we have some. It's just great connections, we're building up a little Pepe Silvia wall here that King has constructed for us to put together, and I'm not crazy, you're crazy. I have not lost my marbles. But anyways, so Jack discovers the history of the Overlook, and he's like, man, this would make a great book, and this would make a great expose, be it fiction or historical, or a little bit of both. So now,
which is interesting, an interesting little meta thing, because the hotel, the Overlook, is inspired by an actual hotel that King saw when he temporarily moved to Boulder in the 1970s. So I don't know. It's interesting that there's this meta moment of King writing about this guy who's writing a book about this guy going to a hotel, and then the guy going to the hotel is wanting to write a book about the hotel. It's this very interesting sort of meta narrative moment that I mean you might not know it if you don't know a little bit of the background of this novel, but it adds an interesting little twist.
Stephen King being meta, that is almost unheard of. So anyways, now with that kind of newfound information, he decides he wants to go to the library and kind of investigate some of this stuff. So we go take another trip to Sidewinder, and he's going through it, and we're getting a lot more of actually, I should probably say this real quick before we go to that. Wendy comes down to try and find him because he's been down there for a while, and for some reason he gets super defensive, kind of like he's trying to hide that he's been drinking, and he's like trying to hide the book and playing coy about it, and he's not even sure why he's doing this, why he's acting this way, but he is all the same, which I think is part of the psychosis of Overlook kind of creeping in there. So that's kind of something to keep in mind, is Jack's kind of hesitant nature even towards Wendy about this, and it's also kind of leading to some mental frustration. That's a very, very that is understating it towards Wendy, to where he's like mentally shouting at her at this point, and we can see the kind of breakdown, because at the start with the wasp's nest and all of this kind of the writing and stuff, we start to see that Jack is healing, and he feels like he's healing, and he feels like he's becoming the person that he was supposed to be, that he was before drinking, yada yada yada, back in his college days. And that lasted for all of like one chapter, and now we're starting to see the decay come in full force, to the point where Wendy is being reminded of behaviors and mannerisms, like him wiping his mouth with his handkerchief or the back of his hand constantly, to the point to where his lips are probably getting chapped and his lips are bleeding. It's just kind of things that she is familiar with from when he was at his worst with his drinking. Those mannerisms starting to pop back up. So yeah, that didn't last long. That kind of, it was almost like it was the eye of the storm. Like he had that almost where things look like they were fine, but here comes the second half of the storm front pushing in. So they go back to Sidewinder. He's looking through some stuff. He's getting a headache because things ain't going good. We have another bit of him and Wendy's relationship kind of starting to show a little bit of strain once again when he asks her for Excedrin, which apparently was something that drunk Jack did a lot because of how Excedrin made him feel, and she notices it and he notices it, and she doesn't have any. So he wants to call Ullman, and he goes and he buys some Excedrin at the drugstore because, hey, I'm going to do that. And he chews them. What kind of monster chews Excedrin? Ah.
Yeah, is Excedrin still around?
I want to say so.
Probably is. I remember you don't hear about it nearly as much anymore.
Here, let me ask handy dandy Google Excedrin. Yeah, Excedrin.com still exists. Uses. What is Excedrin good for? Absolutely a lot of things. Is Excedrin just ibuprofen? People also ask. So, okay, Excedrin is still a thing. So he gets some. He calls Ullman up, and boy, you want to talk about how Jack is somebody who intentionally sticks his hand into the wasp's nest on a metaphorical level. This is like sticking your face in the wasp's nest. He calls Ullman so that he can poke and prod him. He's like, you embarrassed me. You brought up my past. You made me look like a fool. So now I'm going... And he actually says something like that to him. He's like, you embarrassed me. It's so petulant, so petty. And he's just like, oh, I found this scrapbook, and it has the history of it. Oh, hey, is Derwent still the owner? How about Vinnie Gognetti getting murdered in the presidential suite? I know that wasn't his name, but I know you get that, Daniel. What about that, huh? What about Derwent, huh? Is Derwent still the owner? Huh? What about the mob and the mafia ties? Did you know you're running a blood hotel? You didn't tell me any of this. And Ullman's just like, yeah, it wasn't pertinent, you asshole. What do you? Why I would fire you right now if I felt 100% certain that I could get away with it, but I'm only 95%. So you know I'm gonna be calling Al Shockley after this.
This honestly, the whole as it went on, my sympathies vacillated. I was like, I really dislike both of these people.
I honestly was feeling bad for Ullman by the end of it. I'm like, Jesus, Jack, this is just not the play, dude. Like, I'm kind of in agreement with Ullman here. Like, it wasn't pertinent. It wasn't your job to know. Like, would it have been nice to know? Sure, I guess, if you're interested in the history of the hotel. And yeah, of course, he's going to try and sell you the hotel with not telling you about the murders or the mafia ties or Derwent's shady dealings and whatnot. Like, but also, like he said, it's not pertinent to your job. You're just a caretaker.
Don't get me wrong. That is true, and there is no reason Jack should have made that phone call. But but he is just Ullman is just such a uniquely annoying character, and like the way he talks and acts, and it just like any bad thing that happens to him, I'm like, okay, I'm okay with it. He's just because I find him annoying as a person.
Yeah, but yeah, Jack was 100%.
But there's no
reason.
There's literally no reason for Jack to make that. It's like even if he were wanting to do what he was actually what he was alluding to, which is like create this book about the Overlook Hotel and its history and all that. There's literally, even if that he was doing that and he wasn't just blowing smoke and trying to get Ullman all upset and freaked out. Why would you say that? Well, because you're like then their guard is gonna be up. You're just putting up blocks to yourself. So there's like from any perspective, from whether it's like it's just not a good or nice thing to do, but also from like a tactical or strategic perspective, as if for his writing, it's not helping him. It's just very indicative of this sort of like self-destructive tendency that Jack has, and this sort of, as you're saying, that sort of like petty vindictive nature that is causing that. It's the sticking his face into the wasp's nest for no reason.
And once again, he comes so close to self-awareness, so very close, and then just kind of has a little Jackism to where he's just like, it's the kids that are out of touch. One of those kind of moments where he's just so almost there, but then just kind of does some sort of justification to make it to where it's not on him, to where he thinks to himself, is he self-sabotaging this because he knows that they don't need to be at the Overlook, that they need to get out of there because they shouldn't be there? Nah, it's fine. I'm just an idiot. And that's kind of that. Like, the phone call does nothing except for make Jack even more of an asshole in Ullman's eyes, and more of vindicating his opinion. Like, Jack's like, you embarrassed me, you told me I wasn't right for this job, and all he did with that was prove Ullman right. So, like, congratulations?
Well, there is more that came of it. Then he gets a call from Al.
Yeah. But I was building to that. But yeah, so that's kind of the end of that situation, and so they go back to the hotel, and then later that night, Ullman kept his word. He called Shockley, and Shockley calls Jack, and he's not really Jack's friend in this phone call. He's basically just like, dude, like, what are you doing? Why you being this way? This is just stupid. You're being stupid. And Jack's just like, hey man. Oh, something I should mention, by the way. Jack was trying to ask Ullman if I forgot that dude's name again. Derwent. Okay. If Derwent was still the owner, and Ullman was like, hey, Shockley is the majority stockholder. He's got 35%. He's the closest thing to an owner at this point. So, like, get off my back. I don't know about this Derwent thing. I don't care. Like, I'm gonna call Shockley because you're an ass. So Shockley calls him, and he's getting pissed at him because he's like, dude, like, come, what are you doing, man? Why you doing this, man? And Jack's like, oh man, he's an asshole. I just wanted to kind of poke and prod him for fun, I just did it for the lulz, as the kids say. And hey, let me tell you, man, I found this scrapbook, and I could write one killer book about this place. And Shockley's like, are you fucking kidding me, dude? Like,
again, no reason to say that. My man needs to take some lessons from Lil Wayne and move in silence. Or real G's move in silence, like lasagna.
Yeah, imagine.
His pitch for the book is actually really interesting, and yet he's wasting it by, like, on these little petty score settling with Ullman, and then blabbing it to Al. And just think, like, how much more satisfying that revenge would be if you dropped the book on them just later, like a couple years later.
Which is exactly a thought he has too.
Which would have been like 10 times better than just getting this, this little cheap reaction that almost cost him his job, And he's got his family to think about. It just shows a true pettiness and lack of foresight.
Yeah.
In any no matter how you slice it, like I said, like from the morality or like just being a decent, well-adjusted person, it doesn't make sense. From, like, the perspective of getting revenge, it doesn't make sense. Just nothing. None. He even says, I don't really know why I made that phone call. It just one of the more like annoying sections, but in a good way, of course. I'm not saying it's poor writing, but it's just like King does a good job of just writing this guy that sucks.
Yeah, it's like being best friends with the president, and you're just like, oh hey, by the way, I learned some stuff about your campaign and your campaign manager. Boy, some juicy stuff that would really look bad on you, and I'm thinking about writing an expose about it, bud. Just letting you know. Yeah, and it's like clearly Al's just like, don't do that.
Don't do that.
He's like, hey man, I don't expect this to be a 5 to 6 year thing, like how long you think it'll take for your book. I expect this to be a 30-year thing. I'm investing in, like, my life into this hotel and trying to like, get the rest of my life and my retirement going with this hotel. Don't fuck that up for me because you want to write a book about it. Don't do it. And of course, Jack's just like, he's thinking, wow, everybody's against me. I can't believe Al is just taking part on the shit on Jack Torrance week thing that's going on. First it was Wendy and Ullman, and now it's Al. Ah. Jack's kind of insufferable. I don't know if my impressions of him have gotten that point across.
Yeah, it's very much across your feelings about Jack.
Yeah. It's just like, yeah, it's a great idea for a book. And yeah, like if you'd have been a little sneaky and backstabby about it, it would have been better for you if we're being perfectly honest here, because let's be real, like that stuff probably should be written about, Al Shockley's feelings on the matter withstanding or not. But like, don't go and
also artistically, it is a very interesting, and actually, when you get into like the politics and the meta politics about it, it actually is to his pitch, like this idea of like of being a great representative of like post-war American history. It's like you see like the intelligence of Jack, but he just squanders it in these just silly squabbles and just dumb decisions.
Yeah, which, if I'm being honest, I feel like that would actually do more towards building the allure of the Overlook than actually ruining it. People would be like, oh, I want to go to the place where a mafia guy was killed. That sounds like fun.
I think that is definitely true in a 21st century context. I feel like in the 20th century, though, they probably would, not that people would feel differently, but like the wisdom, the common wisdom would have been like the opposite, rather. But now they would definitely lean into it. They would lean into it too far now, where it would like come off as like a little bit like tacky. It's like, okay, well, like, but people actually died here, and you're trying to turn that into a tourist thing. It's like, but now, like, definitely like the real crime people would just go nuts for that.
Yeah. So, yeah, Jack's an idiot, and Al makes him agree to two things if he wants to keep the job, and it's don't call Ullman again and don't write the book. And Jack has to begrudgingly agree to it. And Danny shines this, actually. He shines all of it, and he kind of references it a little bit to Wendy, which is, once again, kind of having her little alarm bells going off as well. But now I would say we got three more major things that I think we should talk about. I'm going to try and kind of go a little quicker through them. Four, technically, because I think Danny and Wendy's conversation in the car is also important. I'll just quickly, this is probably going to be out of order, but I'm just going to jump to Danny and Wendy in the car real quick, because it is important. Wendy's thinking that she needs to talk to Danny about this takes place after the hose incident that I'll get into in a minute. Just for, like I said, I'm kind of jumping around the timeline here, but I just want to kind of hit these kind of quickly. But Wendy's been thinking she wants to talk to Danny about his shining, basically, without knowing what it is, and about Tony and all of this, and she wants to get the truth out of him, and she doesn't want to intimidate him. So they finally have this conversation. This is while they're gone and while Jack's supposed to be trimming the hedges. So like I said, this is after. I'm just kind of jumping around. And he kind of finally opens up to her a little bit and tells her a little bit about what he was thinking and about how things are going. And she is a little more receptive to it and thinking that this might be a little more than just what Edmonds was saying about just kids feeling things out a little better. So we get a nice little build between Danny and Wendy's relationship, and I think this is going to play a major role later on when things start kind of going very bad. She might be a little more receptive to him instead of just possibly brushing it off. Like if he would have told her the hose story, she would have probably brushed it off even at this point. But I feel like it's going to come into play in part 4 and part 5. That this is going to be the start of the build of the relationship that allows her to be the true mother figure to him when it matters in the climax, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I just want to throw out here that she actually is a really good mom. She's a great character. Like I think overall she is my favorite character in the book so far.
Yeah. Her only flaw, and I'm really using this term very loosely, is her jealousy towards Danny's feelings towards Jack compared to her.
Yeah,
And I really feel like I'm
can,
reaching.
I can kind of understand where she's coming from though, especially when with the unresolved feelings about Jack having broken Danny's arm. Even it's I can understand where she's coming from with that.
I mean, I can kind of speak to that firsthand to where, granted, I'm not the mother in this situation, I'm the father, but when I'm like, it's time to put my kid to bed, and I'm like, can I have a hug? Can I have a hug? Can I have a hug? And he's just staring at me or staring somewhere else, and maybe he'll give me like a 1 or 2 second long hug where he'll just kind of like go into my shoulder a little bit and then get back up immediately. Meanwhile, when it's mom's turn, it's like 10, 15, 20, 30-second hugs, and I'm just like, I want a mom hug sometime. So I can kind of get where she's coming from. It's not any malice or anything. It's just me being like, gee, I wish I could get hugs that lasted that long from my son. Yeah. So I can see where she's coming from a little bit. So like I said, I feel like I just had to really reach to be like, if she has a flaw so far, it's that. But even then, that's like so minor, like insanely minor. But yeah, I think that conversation was really important for their relationship, and I think that's going to be the bridge that kind of puts them together at the end of the book. The start of building that bridge.
She basically gets to the point where by the end of the conversation she believes that Tony, she doesn't know what Tony is, but she believes that Tony exists. We're using that term loosely. We don't really know to what extent Tony exists or what he is a manifestation of, but she believes that Danny does communicate to Tony. She believes, and she's basically at this point she's like, I'm pretty sure that he does have this sort of like precognition. By the end of it, she's pretty convinced of that, and it does a good job of like wrapping up. Danny also susses out he also mentions during that conversation some things like about the phone call, that really confirm. Basically, that's what basically just seals it for her, is like she that's how she knows that he's authentically has the shine, I guess.
Yeah, whether she actually knows how to convey it or not. But one thing as well, one important thing to bring up is to really put in perspective how bad her relationship with her mother is when confronted about it, because she is trying to give her and Danny an out for Overlook, and even possibly Jack an out before it's too late. To where she's like, we can leave and come back and see your dad in the spring, or we can convince him and the three of us can leave. He would rather stay, despite the nightmares, despite everything, he would rather stay at the Overlook than go to his grandma's house.
Well, yeah, that's true. But I think that's also very indicative of like the love that Danny has for his parents, is because what is particularly driving him off is like this idea of like how her mom is always thinking about ways to get Danny taken away from his parents, and all of like the negative, the rancor that Wendy's mother feels for her, and he feels that on such a primal level that it just, to him, that is just it's unthinkable to go there and to subject himself to that sort of emotionally unstable environment.
Yeah. And so backing up now, let's talk about the hose incident. So this is our first real interaction that Danny takes with Room 217. So he was told by Halloran, don't go into that room. Whatever you do, that's the one place you shouldn't go. Please don't go in there. I saw some bad, or no, it was the maid that saw some bad things in there. I think he might have as well. I think he said that he went with her, and I don't remember the details specifically, but basically 217's bad. And so Danny's standing outside of it, and he knows all the rooms are locked, and this is kind of what I was mentioning earlier on. He's sitting there just like, yeah, there's the master key that Dad has on in like the reception area or whatever, and he told me not to take it, to never take it, and of course I'm never going to take it because that would get me in trouble, and I don't want to get in trouble with that, so I'm not going to take it. Of course I have it in my pocket. It's just another one of those situations, kind of like the timer. Like I said, something that Wendy notices is Danny is picking up a lot of mannerisms from her and Jack, and he's wiping his lips like his dad does. He's picking up these little things, and I think that is very pertinent in the whole thing with that, because it's very similar, very 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 similar to Jack's. Like, I didn't change the timer. There's no way I would ever change the timer. Scout's honor, I didn't change the timer. Yeah, so I changed the timer by a minute. So what? It's very similar to that, and I got a good chuckle out of that too. I'm like, haha, reincorporating that, but with Danny instead of Jack. That's funny. So the first time, this first incident here, he puts the key into the lock. It goes in smoothly, flawlessly. It was a perfect lock, a perfect key. It went in beautifully. Whatever. But then he subconsciously takes the key out and puts it back in his pocket, and he starts heading back. And something that he kind of thought about when they were given the first initial tour was he looked at the fire extinguisher on the wall, and it was one of those. It's one of the ones where it's a hose. And it's not the chemical ones in the red can. It's the hose ones that's attached to the plumbing. And he thought it reminded him of a snake. So now he's seeing it again. And it's kind of scaring him because it once again reminds him of a snake. And as he's walking back to the stairs, because he has to walk toward it, the first kind of layer of it falls off onto the ground. And it scares him. And he's like, he's trying to rationalize it, but it's not really working. So he's walking up to it thinking, oh man, it's going to move, it's going to move, it's going to move. And he jumps over it. And here's an interesting thing. I don't know if this is going to come back to anything or not, but he jumps over it. He feels like it kind of moves towards to follow him, but he also feels like in the effort of jumping over it, and keep in mind, he's like 5 years old, so he's probably like 3.5 feet tall. He feels like the top of his hair brushes the ceiling, but he's not sure if that's actually something that happened or if that's just kind of the heat of the moment making him feel things. Now, I don't know if that's something that's important or not, but I want to throw it out there all the same. I don't think Danny is some Olympic triple jumper or anything like that. Just had a thought. In the doctor's office, when he's talking to Wendy and Jack, and they're talking about Danny, and they're kind of talking about how receptive he is to all of these things, the doctor says that I feel like the next thing you're going to tell me is that he can levitate. I don't know if that's pertinent or not. Just like I don't know if it's pertinent that mentioning that Danny isn't sure if he felt like he brushed the ceiling or not with that jump, despite being a 5-year-old. But I just want to throw that out there. I just made that connection too. I'm not saying Danny can levitate, but like I just want to get that out there because it's just two things that kind of stuck out to me, and now that I think about it, are coming together possibly to make sense together. I just want to get that out there. I don't know if it matters or not. We'll see, I guess. But it's something that stuck out to me, and I just wanted to mention it.
That is very interesting.
It could be nothing. I could just be trying to search for something from nothing. But all the same, just a cool thing to think about. He jumps over it, and he's running back to the stairs, and now he can hear it slithering after him, because now it is basically turned into a snake. And he's kind of getting that vertigo effect to where he feels like every step he takes closer to the stairs are getting a step further away from him. And is just kind of like, stuck in the kind of terror of the situation. And he makes it to the stairs finally, and he gets brave enough to turn around, and it's exactly where he saw it last. It hasn't moved at all. It's still just sitting on the floor. And I feel like this is once again a situation to where it's, like I mentioned it earlier with the Wasp's Nest, where it's like the hotel is doing these things to kind of mess with them. To where the one time Jack didn't think to prepare for wasps, there were wasps. Danny's sitting there essentially like expecting this to happen. He's scared of it. He's like, oh, this is like a snake The snake's going to come and get me. He jumps over it and runs away because he's afraid of it. And what does he hear? The snake coming after him. So, but when he looks, it's still on the ground. It's this hotel messing with these expectations. And for Jack, it was the sudden lapse of expectation. And for Danny, it was the presence of expectation. So, like, that's kind of what I mean, where it's like it's kind of messing with their predispositions towards things. It's good. It's good writing. It's very good writing. It's very, very tense situations. So yeah, that was the hose incident. Woo, spooky. Woo. But I feel like it's important to keep in mind all the same. It's just the hotel building up the tension. And so the penultimate thing I want to talk about, and by all means, if you want to add to anything, stop me at any time, because I feel like I'm talking a lot here.
I think you're doing a good job here.
Yeah, the penultimate thing I want to bring up is the topiary incident, and this is when Danny and Wendy are leaving to go to Sidewinder for like one last time before the snow comes in, and that's when they have their conversation in the car. Jack is supposed to be trimming the hedges of the topiary, and so he does the bunny a little bit, and it's very minor what he needs to do. He needs to really just kind of fix a little bit of what's going on with the rabbit and the dog. The lions and the buffalo look kind of fine, so like whatever. So he does the rabbit. He kind of gives it a little bit of a trim. He's talking to himself. He's making crummy jokes, just being a bit weird, just very, very weird. And as he's inspecting his work,
I think that's just a thing that people have to do with I think that's an example of the isolation already starting to set in, because what he's doing is he's doing jokes and bits essentially for people that aren't there, like he's I think this is like and during the Danny and Wendy passage earlier, or I guess contemporary with this, they mentioned the Donner Party again, and that's kind of, I think that's kind of what he's really seeding here is like this isolation, and this getting a little, it's starting to affect them already essentially.
I'm gonna call it now. I don't know if it's gonna be Wendy's first interaction with the hotel, but one of Wendy's interactions with the hotel, I'm calling it now. I'm calling my shot. I'm pointing out into right field or whatever it was. Wendy is going to have an incident where she goes into the freezer and she's going to see what she thinks is human carcasses instead of the actual meat that they have.
That, you know what? I think they might be onto something, because he keeps the idea of the Donner Party is something that continues to weigh on her.
Yeah.
So I think you might be onto something.
It may not be her walking in the kitchen and seeing human bodies hanging from hooks or something like that, but something to do with the meat that they eat at some point. Maybe it's the Thanksgiving turkey. Maybe it'll be in the Thanksgiving turkey, because Halloran made a point to mention the turkey that they got for Thanksgiving, and we haven't hit Thanksgiving yet. We're in like early November at this point. So maybe it's going to be when that happens. Maybe she's going to accidentally ruin the turkey because of this. But at some point, I'm calling it now, the meat that they have, she's going to see it as human flesh because of her concern about the Donner Party that has been ever present and keeps coming back around. Her thing is going to be cannibalism. It's going to be the Donner Party. She's going to mistake the food that they have for human flesh, and it's going to freak her out. That's going to be her incident. Or at least one of them.
With Jack being the loose cannon that he is, maybe if she does ruin the turkey or something like that, that could lead to him having this one of those episodes where it could even be the breakthrough moment where you really in a lot of like stories obviously, but also in just interpersonal relationships, there can sometimes be a moment where there's like no real coming back from that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That could be that moment for them. So I don't know. That's an interesting idea. Let's watch that one in this next upcoming part.
So yeah, I don't know how it's going to come up, but I'm feeling very confident that her episode is going to have to deal with cannibalism and the Donner Party. I don't think I'm being revelatory or anything here. Like, there's so many things. The Donner Party has come up multiple times. It just feels obvious. That's her big fear of being up there. It was her big fear when they were driving up. She was thinking about it. It's come back up on the radio. I feel like this is just me picking up the clues that King has placed. Not even, like, subtly. It hasn't been subtle. So, like, I feel like this is just a very, like, obviously, maybe this is a red herring too. It could be a red herring, but that's just kind of how I feel. Anyways, so he's trimming the bunny. He admires his work, and instead of moving on, he decides to just kind of play around in the playground. He's just goofing off, just kind of coming to terms with his lack of youth. And I guess wondering where that went. Reminiscing about his terrible father, who he kind of liked, I guess, for some reason. And...
Well, I mean, look at Danny.
Fair enough. And he feels embarrassment because he feels like his little like shtick of making jokes to nobody that are really unfunny has been noticed. And he hears something, and he turns around, and he's like, oh, I don't know what's going on. But then he notices, eventually, it takes him a while, but he realizes that the bunny, who was standing on its hind legs, is now on all fours. The dog that was in a begging position is now in, like, a walking position. The lions have now moved in such a way that they are blocking the path. And he's like, whoa, that's weird. And we're having a situation, it's almost like a, if there's any Doctor Who fans, the Weeping Angels kind of situation, to where as he's looking away to like catch the movement of one, the one that's no longer in his field of view is now moving closer towards him, and it's like it's such a well written scene. It's
also a great trope. I love that trope.
Yeah, when it's done well, it's very, very good.
Like it just that sort of the primal fear that you can't look away. I don't know. Like that was used to great effect in the I don't mean to derail us here, but the Resident Evil Village DLC. Like it just that does a great job of like portraying the sort of the fear and the helplessness you feel, and like that just the strong desire to not look away. It's I don't know. To me, it's just conceptually a very interesting horror trope.
Yeah, that was in terms of the Shadow of Rose DLC. That was a sequence where when it started happening, I'm like, oh, it's a Weeping Angels thing. That's rad. And then when I'm like, and I wasn't expecting there to be like 6 or 7, so I like died because one just kind of was behind me and I had no idea because it was my first time going through it. I'm like, oh, we're playing this game. Okay, I guess. To the point to where like by the time I was done with it, it went from me being like, oh, wow, what a great use of this, to me being like, this is going to be frustrating on repeat playthroughs, isn't it? So it was very well done, and this is not me saying that it was a bad sequence in the game, but it was I very much went from this is very cool to being tired of it by the time I was done with it, to where I was like, oh,
I don't. It really creeps me out. It just like by the end, I was just like, oh, I was just so happy to be out of there.
Yeah.
It just is a great trope.
Yeah, I was trying to be very cute with it too and speedrun it, so I was dying multiple times because I was, like I said, I was being cute with it and just being like, haha, dancing around you, mom, and then getting killed because I wasn't doing it correctly. So I was like, I guess getting a little frustrated. I don't know. It never scared me. I think stuff like that's cool. I know a lot of things will scare people like that, but for me, I just find if it's well done, I don't get scared by it. I just enjoy it because I'm like, ah, nice, sweet. Which same thing in Bienvenido in the base game. I know Resident Evil 8. Let's not get too far off track here. But with the Ritus Fetus times 10, when that happened, I'm like, oh, nice. Which I know a lot of people, they were like, that was the scariest part of the game for me. And I was just like, oh, I love that they did that. That's really cool. What a great sequence. So that's how I approach good horror. Is I get excited by it. I don't get scared by it.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, to say scared is I don't know how to put this. I don't want to sound like I'm trying to flex and be like, yeah, I never get scared. But it's just like it's not like a sense of mortal terror. Like I actually feel like something bad is going to happen to me. but it's I can feel like this sort of exhilaration and like a almost a sense of nervousness. It's like when it's really well done, and that's something that actually kind of get in this book as well. In this next, I guess, or last portion that you're gonna talk about, but you can finish up with the topiary animals.
Yeah. So yeah, good horror. Just this is like you said, it's a common trope, but when it's done right, it's very good. So yeah, he eventually just kind of hits his breaking point. He closes his eyes and he's just like, this isn't real. And then when he opens his eyes, everything's back to normal, and he just kind of walks past it, just like, that was weird. Whatever. I'm not scared of you. And that's just kind of the end of that situation. Which, a funny little thing that happens that I just got a little chuckle out of me was when they come home. Wendy's like, wow, great job at the topiary, Jack. And he's like, yup, sure. Because all he did was the rabbit. But yeah, so that was Jack's incident, his second incident with the hotel, the first being the wasp. And now we get to our final bit here, the second incident with Danny in the hotel, which is once again room 217. So Danny has come back to room 217. He once again has taken the key, the master key. And a fun little thing here that he did that I greatly appreciate is he picked up the hose, put it back, was poking it, and being like, yeah, you cheap prick, yeah, do it, you won't.
Which is funny because that's a phrase that he's picked up from his dad. It's supposed to there's a slight comedy there because that's a phrase that Jack uses quite a bit.
Yeah, I just love that he's just goading it. He's just like, you suck. You're trash. I'm gonna throw some dirt in your eye. Just like really just shitting on a hose. It's just so funny. Just this 5-year-old poking it and whispering, "Haha, got you, see?" Like, I don't know. Something about that was just really funny to me, and it's just so on point. Like, I can absolutely see a 5-year-old doing that. So he finally. And I guess this is as good of a time as any to talk about something that King does with the writing in this book. That
Hold on. Sorry, can I interject here really quickly?
Yeah.
Just before all of this happens, this is when the snow, the real snow comes down, and they're at this point. From this point on through the rest of the novel, they are essentially, well, as far as I know, from this point on through the rest of the novel, they are essentially now stuck at the hotel.
Yeah, the true isolation has begun.
Phone service has gone down. All they have now is the radio.
Yeah. So now he's back at the door to 217, and I feel like this is as good a place as any to bring up this thing that King does with his writing in this book that I just find so fascinating. Is he will have the characters' thoughts interject the prose. And it's so interesting how he does it, because he'll be like because this is third person omniscient, how this is written, and so we're in the characters' minds, and as I said in the last one, he jumps from POV to POV seamlessly, to where we'll be having a paragraph with Danny, and just as the scene progresses, now we're in Wendy's head, and we have these very subtle clues that kind of go, because it'll go from Daddy did this to Jack did this, or something like that. And it's just a really great little way of having done it. Like we said last week, it's very hard to do, and King basically is the exception that proves the rule for things like that. But it's similarly to that, with him interjecting the characters' thoughts into the prose. We'll be having an explanation of their feelings or the situations, and it'll cut off mid-sentence. It'll be a paragraph break, and in bracket in parentheses and in italics we'll have an interjecting thought, and then after that it will be the rest of the sentence that was breaking off and a new paragraph. And it's so striking, it's so visually striking, it's so like it's a major pace breaker to the reading, to the flow of the paragraph, but it works so well. It's very manic, and it just I feel like I mostly see it with Jack and Danny. It's probably happened a couple of times with Wendy, probably multiple times with Wendy for all I can remember, but I feel like it's super, super prevalent with Jack and Danny, and it's just such a great little thing that King does that just really adds to the book. I can't really explain it very artistically.
It adds a lot of naturalism to it, right? Like when you think about your own, or when I think about my own thought patterns. A lot of the times it's like thought, and then there can be like this interjectory, like, where'd that come from kind of situation, like, and like especially if it's something that's like a very visceral, like, and that's what it is most of the time when King is employing, is the character coming to a sudden realization or having a sudden sensation, something like that. It adds a lot of like a naturalism, I think, to it that makes it feel very you feel very, it makes it feel organic and real.
Yeah, and it's something that comes up a lot here in this section as well. And in the previous time, he was thinking about going into 217, and it's such a great way to have an extra level inside the characters' heads, because we're already in third person omniscient, but to have that extra level of thought, that kind of like jarring, breaking, intrusive thought, it's just such a great little device that King uses to just really flesh these characters out in very natural and subtle ways. It's great. I love it. It's been happening the entire book, and it's a really big way of how this scene is written, and how Danny is interacting with 217. So I feel like this was a good time to kind of bring it up as a whole. But yeah, just very cool. Very cool. So he finally opens the door and goes in, and it's just a normal room. There's a great little... This is such a well-written passage, just as a whole. Yeah, I'm a major Stephen King fan. I'm going to be a lot more, I guess, fanboy about it. Maybe not fanboy, but I'm going to be a lot more receptive to things that I like, and a lot more forgiving for things that other people don't, because I'm a really big Stephen King fan. I'll admit that right now. Except for the first Dark Tower book for some reason. But I really love how this is written. Just the simple action of him walking up to the mirror across the room, putting his hand on the mirror, and letting it drop down is just a very cool... It's written in such a way that Danny... It feels like Danny is doing it subconsciously, like he's spectating himself doing this. It's like almost like he is a passenger in his own body. And I don't know, it's very cool. It was a very fun passage to read. I'm like, damn, this is just really well written.
That was very well written. And I don't know, kind of along the lines of, like, it does seem like when he does go through these fugue states, these trances, that do seem to be sort of almost an out-of-body experience to him. So I think there's something to it. It's like when he's shining, it's almost like he's like, I don't know quite how to say it, but like he's like being subject, or like his at least his physical form is acting in a way that's not fully under his control, if that makes sense.
Yeah. But I don't know, I really liked how that whole bit was written. But yeah, he goes into the bathroom, and this is once again kind of playing with expectations here, to where he sees the bathtub, the curtains there, and I think he thinks about it like, oh man, it was some kind of like how he's gonna pull the curtain back, and he's just kind of expecting to see just a tub, and he pulls it back, and there's a dead woman in icy water, and she's staring at him. And boy, what a thing to do. Okay. Have you ever, and I think, I would like to think this might be a common thing, and it's not a fear, but it's almost like a paranoia, like an instinctual paranoia, or maybe even just a fear of the unknown, that is like I said, it's like a primal kind of thing, to where if you go into the bathroom and like the curtain is drawn over the tub, do you ever just like pull the curtain back or just peek in and look?
Yeah. it's just like it's a psychological thing. It's that's the place where, in your mind, you're supposed to be, you're at your most vulnerable, essentially, and you're supposed to be alone, and yet, so there, when there's this area that you see, and that you're not able to fully, like, I guess, have full understanding of the situation. There's something in the back of your mind that triggers like, there's no one that's supposed to be in here. Theoretically, someone could be back there, so I'm going to look. You know, I don't do it like every time, but there've been definitely times in my life, you know, where I'm like, let me just check back this. What's going on back there?
Yeah. I don't know. It's just that's one of those weird things, and like I said, I think it's a primal kind of thing that has kind of stayed with humanity, and I think it kind of comes from that fear of the unknown. And you see that big curtain, and it makes the tub now suddenly an unknown. So I don't know. I just it kind of draws me back to that kind of feeling when Danny does that, and of course he gets what no person has ever gotten. I hope, in that there is something actually there when he draws the curtain, and it's this naked woman that's staring at him that has long since been dead in this icy water, and it's such a well described moment that I can just very vividly picture this woman and this corpse who has been dead for a long time. He really stresses that she's been dead for a long time, starts to get out of the tub, and you can hear the ice cracking and breaking as she gets out, and it's like, wow, what a scene. And so Danny runs away. The door is now shut, and he knows that the door is unlocked, but instead of trying to open the door, he's banging on the door, and he has this moment where he remembers, and he gets this moment of clarity, this calming Zen kind of phase, where he remembers Dick Halloran's statement, "It's like pictures, nothing here can hurt you," and he has his eyes closed, and he's like, okay, this is just a vision, nothing can hurt me, I'll be okay. And then he feels the hands close around his throat, and he turns around and opens his eyes and sees the purple face staring at him. And that's where the part ends.
That was such great misdirection by King, by having Halloran be extremely wrong.
And Halloran, if you remember, was afraid that he might be wrong. He was trying to convince himself as he was leaving that he was right.
Yeah.
So now we can't even trust Halloran, who was struggling to try and have justification to trust himself in the first place. And it's like,
Many such instances of people, of times when you have to convince yourself of that you're right about something, you're probably not.
Yeah. It's such a very, very, very well written book. It's doing everything right, I feel.
I guess you could theoretically say the same about the Wasps if we were to take the Wasps as some sort of manifestation of the house, but like this putting it beyond the shadow of a doubt was such a great moment, and that's what I was saying earlier. Like I was just, it took a lot of fortitude to not just keep reading ahead, because I had to just sit in that discomfort when I finished reading yesterday, waiting for the session today, and it's just like, what a terrible place to end, but in the best possible way.
Yeah. So yeah, King is the king of cliffhangers.
So good. But yeah, that should wrap us up for part 3. Next we have parts 4. There's part 4, and then I think we'll be wrapping it up with part 5. But man, I'm really enjoying this book. Lots of interesting stuff here. Lots of interesting sort of like from the standpoint of like it's just a very engaging book to read, but also there's just a lot of very interesting sort of like metaphor, and like I don't know, it's just a really particularly engaging book.
Yeah, I feel like it's safe to say that at his best, King proves that he is one of the best living authors, and maybe even more than that, maybe one of the best modern authors.
Yeah, he's really good. I'm generally, I know this has been like a long running controversy, and I think we even alluded to it a little bit the first time we talked about this, but I don't know. I'm very pro King, just generally. maybe not everything that he's written is like high art per se, but like I don't know, it's always just very engaging, and I think this one is particularly it is artful, and it's as well as like very engaging, and just can't can't get enough of the book. It's really good.
I think, and I might be off base here a little bit, but my understanding of it, I have not read every single King book, far from it. But I feel like what it is he has just astronomical highs, like just beyond what some authors could even dream of. And because of that, his lows are seen as like craterous lows, but I feel like his median is still top tier for most other authors.
I think that's an interesting idea there. It's like the dangers of high expectations. Like once you reach those your high highs, when somebody's comparing it against like your peak moments and it comes up wanting, then it's people are more likely to really dogpile on it, and in a way that's somewhat unfair, really, because it may not be as bad as they're thinking, but the absolute scale has shifted to accommodate not necessarily the length and breadth of a genre or literature writ large, but you're having to compete with yourself every time.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Yeah, and King's catalog is just remarkable. It's like 50 plus books, so many novellas. Like he's written so much for so long that, like, yeah, not everything is going to hit the same quality as The Shining or It or 11/22/63 or Salem's Lot or Pet Sematary. Like his classics, his true absolute classics. Not all of them are going to hit those highs, but like, think about your favorite band. Do you like every single song they've written? Do you like every single album that they've released? Or are there a couple of things here and there where you're like, that kind of sucked, but it's whatever. I still love the band because they're a great band. I just didn't like this song or this album. Like I can definitely say that for my favorite bands, absolutely. But it's fine. It doesn't mean that I hate the band now because of that low point, and it doesn't diminish their high point. It's just, they're humans. Not everything that they make, artists in general, not everything they make is going to be a grand slam, or even a home run, or even a base hit, to keep this metaphor up. But it's fine, and we shouldn't have expectations for every single swing to be a grand slam.
Yeah, and this is something that I've talked about before, but I like the idea of just letting an artist be an artist. Let them, organically explore their ideas and explore their interests, because I think there's a massive danger of like becoming too reactive to the feedback, too reactive to you never want to get into the position where as an artist you are playing the hits.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously that is a fate that that everybody falls into eventually, but it's just like, it is kind of antithetical to being your most artistic self.
Yeah. And I feel like that's something that people kind of they kind of lose perspective on with King. And the simple fact of the matter is that dude's written so many things that there's going to be some bad in there. There's going to be some mediocre in there. But that does not take away from the greats. And I think The Shining, so far, is definitely one of the greats. And its reputation is being one of the greats, and I'm feeling my expectations have been met and possibly even been exceeded. Going into this book, I've seen the movie, I know the reputation of the book, I know the reputation of King, I know how I feel about King going in, so maybe I have a little bit of a predisposition in favor of him, but I mean, this book is hitting it for me. This is a great book, and if I go and read the Tommyknockers and I'm like, man, that book sucked, or if I go ahead and reread the first Dark Tower and I'm like, man, this book still sucks, it's not going to change my feelings on The Stand or It or The Shining or Misery or the other ones that I've read that I'm like, these are great books. I love these books. These are fantastic. So it is what it is. Not everything's going to hit, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But anyways, that'll do it for The Shining. So yeah, next time we'll cover part 4. And I am so looking forward to it. Oh my god, man. Stephen King is one of my favorites. And he just continues to show me why with each book of his I read.
I know I've said this probably several of the last books that we've read, but this might be my favorite book that we've covered, at least so far. We'll see how how we land on it on the backstretch, but I just like page to page, this is just really, really doing it for me. I'm really happy we read this.
Yeah, I'm not gonna get ahead of myself, and I'll try and say how I feel about it in relative to our 2023 catalog. Hopefully by the end of the final episode. I don't want to put the cart in front of the horse just yet, which is something that I kind of did with Jurassic Park, but it's okay. I think I still kind of feel the same about it now as I did by the end of July. So
that's fair. We don't want another situation where you're getting bombed on the beaches of Costa Rica.
Yeah, that wasn't fun. But Aloe Vera is a joy.
Well, thank you everybody for listening. Once again, this is the Sad Boys Book Club. I'm Daniel.
I'm Dusty.
And looking forward to seeing you next time. Bye.
Take care.